Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program, we're going to be talking about pursuing the authentic self. Well, you ask yourself, well, wait a minute, I kind of have a pretty good idea of who I am. What's this all about? Well, really think about that. Who are you really? Are you really your authentic self, so to speak? After all, I remember reading a quote not too long ago that said, I am actually the person of a culmination of personalities that I learned from. That could be a pretty scary proposition, especially if you were a kid who grew up sitting in front of the television. You might want to consider whether or not authenticity is something you've ever experienced. On our program today, we're going to be talking with shaman, author, and teacher, Christina Pratt. She's joining us here talking about shamanic healing, which is a center located in Portland, Oregon. She is also author of 2-volume set, an encyclopedia of shamanism, and is also a host of an international live internet radio show, Why Shamanism Now? She's joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today to find out how we can retrieve our authentic selves so that we can live our soul's purpose. Christina, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Now, how did you start this? Is this something that, were you one of those kids that played and did some neat things in the sandbox that was just unbelievable compared to what other kids did on the playground?
No, actually, I was really kind of a boring nerd kid.
Ah.
I went to college and studied chemistry. So.
Oh, there you go. That was your first authentic self, right?
Yeah.
So how did all this start for you?
Well, as in my early 20s, I started realizing, I started experiencing stress-related physical health problems at a very early age. You know, you should have been having these problems in your 40s, but I was having them in my 20s, a little overachiever. And in my pursuit of healing, I came upon basically the realization of the quote you just said, which is that I was just a culmination of everything everybody had taught me to be, and I had no idea who I was. Mm-hmm. Not a clue. And that I had been the A student, I had been the good daughter, I had been the first child, and I was everything my culture taught me about, trying to be a woman, which was confusing in that era, actually. Mm-hmm. But the point is, I had no idea who I really was, and that was really the root of my illness. And so I ditched everything. I went to New York to go back to dancing, and in the process of doing that, which is what I believed was the most authentic thing for me to do. I didn't really know, but that was sort of the last time I remembered being true to myself was when I was dancing as a younger person. So I went back to dance professionally, which didn't go all that well, but it took me just kind of head on into a collision with this shamanic path. And mm-hmm. So it wasn't ever something that I wanted. What I knew I wanted at that time is to know why I was here, mm-hmm. to really test that theory that we are all here for a reason, and what is that, and to get on with it in my 20s, not spend my retirement wondering what it might be, but to get on with it at that time.
Especially when you consider if you wait till the point of this retirement, that will you have time and the energy to do anything about it?
Well, and you're deeply ingrained in all those mm-hmm. patterns of who you've learned to be. They're big ruts, and they're much harder to get out of when they're that formed. It's mm-hmm. a little easier when we're in our teens and our 20s. We're still a little more plastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of hard to shake that fruit out of the tree, isn't it, when it's just sticking there and not going anywhere, I guess.
Yeah. And we live in a culture that really tends to move us. I don't know that it's intentional. I'm not a great big conspiracy theorist, but just the tendency of contemporary American life, moves us toward numbness. Mm-hmm. It moves us toward sort of dumbing down, going shopping, not really asking for much from life. And that's the first thing that I do with my students is constantly remind them, ask for more. Mm-hmm. Your life should be filled with what gives you passion. If you can't do it 100% and passionately, don't do it at all.
And the thing is, too, Christina, it's really not a conspiracy when you really can pull back the veil and realize the kind of influence that leads you to make decisions that really aren't yours to begin with. And truth in that is, first of all, especially when you talk about contemporary American life, is that we find ourselves, especially, in a position where we're comparing ourselves with where we're at compared to where somebody else is. And those so-called social markers that if you haven't hit these certain areas by this certain time in your life, you must be off. There must be something wrong with you. But, we've got a solution for that, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, or whether it's getting involved with the self-help industry, so to speak. And I thought it was really interesting how that was presented in a way in the book which was made from the book which was turned into a movie, Fight Club, was just about that very thing. Like, I've had enough. How do I express myself to a point that goes beyond what I believed I truly was?
Yeah. So the thing that I found in shamanic worldviews, because I really look at shamanism cross-culturally as a global phenomenon, as something humanity does.
Mm-hmm.
And at the core of it is this belief, and this is different from religious beliefs, that the core of these shamanic cultures is the belief that every human being has a unique thing to give to the world, and they can only do it in this lifetime. So this isn't about karma or any of that other stuff we throw around all the time. This is about the uniqueness that you came into the world to make manifest. It's never been known before, so there's no one to follow and no other markers to test yourself on because it's unique to you. And it will never be done again. So if you fail to do it in this lifetime, it becomes a weakness in the fabric of the whole universe because you didn't do it. And so there's this real pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But that thing is the thing that gives us passion, and it's our passion that gives us life, and it's our passion that gives us a feeling of life force after we've sort of thrown all that youth away, which frankly, is the audience you're speaking to, is those of us who've, gotten into this next phase of our life going, well, now what?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, where is all that promise? Where is all that dream? Even for the people that can say, I've done everything I thought was going to make me happy and feel fulfilled. Why don't I? And this, to me, comes back to this whole idea out of shamanism, which is we have a purpose that we feel a powerful passion for, and most of us have been driven away from it by one thing or another. Again, not a big conspiracy. It's just how things work out in American life. And so what the path is for me with people is not so much this whole self-help idea, but first to get people connected to their own spirit help. So I'm not the teacher. I'm not the guru. That one of the aspects of shamanic skills is it connects you to your own spirit help, because there's a belief not only do you have a soul's purpose, but you have spirit help that you can communicate with directly, and they can help to guide you on this path. And so I'm just kind of shepherding this thing along the way. Mm-hmm. So it's to connect you with your teacher and then to begin to understand what skills do I need. And humanity has had mystery schools from forever, right? So they've always known human beings fall into human traps. That's our nature. And so these are the ways human beings avoid that. And so we learn these skills, and then we learn them in a cosmology. And the beauty of a cosmology or a way of looking at the world is it gets you to look at your blind spots. And that is the failure of self-help programs, is that it's all about what you can see, what you can do, what you can manifest, what you can envision, what you can, visualize in your crystals, what your life coach tells you to do. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not about teaching you where you're in your own way, where you are blind, where you are deaf, because we all are, but we don't have to stay that way. And it's learning through those places that grow us up into the person who can live our soul's purpose. And so by avoiding all that messy stuff, we actually avoid becoming the person who can actually do what we've come here to do. And that process in life is really exciting. It gives life meaning. And that's a big challenge for people today is, why does my life feel so empty? Why do I feel so alienated and disconnected? I've got good kids. I got a good life. I love my partner. What's the problem? Mm-hmm. The problem is us and our relationship with ourselves and our willingness to go on those messy paths in a way that guides us deeper and deeper into our soul's purpose.
Well, the other thing, too, Christine, is I believe is when you identify the ideal that people feel inherently that there is a problem, is you have to also wonder if that particular thought or feeling is real, or was that created, as the idea, okay, you seem to have achieved what you think you should have achieved, but there's more. And whether or not that was a seed that was implanted a long time ago by this cultural ideal, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. As you say, it's not conspiracy, but, in a way there is some conspiracy to it because people are conspiring to have you think, I need more. And especially in America, where we're in a consumptive society, there's only one way you can perpetuate that, and that's through training, mm-hmm. getting somebody to feel, is there more to life? And, as children, we may yearn for that as a biological fact, but by adults, I think that becomes a conditioning that slid past the conscious radar in such a way that it becomes embedded until that can be removed where you have an authentic hunger. Then you can really say, okay, now I know that there's something missing because it's really my soul talking to me and not a matter of conditioning over the years. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's a very important point, too, because in the same way that conditioning, as you've just talked about, can kind of drive us away from that authenticity, we actually ultimately, once we're listening to our soul and stumbling along that, path, we actually need support because it's so easy to just get sucked back in. There's so much momentum to just lie down on the couch, watch 17 hours of TV, and eat. Right?
What
I
a
just
day!
have cable and watch these shows too, and it's work to move out of that momentum. It's kind of like the salmon swimming upstream. And so one of the things we discovered after about almost the first 2 decades, really, of doing this work is that we had to take the community element seriously so that we start having positive reinforcement from those around us. Not all this negative sort of seduction back into the, easier way of living, but people that are on the journey with you. And so that's one thing that we are very consciously involved in, is just that you have mentors, you have peers, you have people along the path with you, so that when you falter, and you will, because we do, that someone goes, yeah, I did that last week. Come on, back on the that there's this real sense of camaraderie on the journey. It's a bit like, a band of pirates, but still. Mm-hmm. At least
and it's interesting too, Christine, as you bring up another great point is the idea of faltering and that's okay. Hence the conditioning I was talking about. And that even happens, it starts in schools. Sure, you achieved a C, but Mary over here got an A+, and not that we're saying there's anything wrong with you, but inherently you feel, geez, my C wasn't good enough to get the teacher's attention. Mm-hmm. That's the kinds of things I'm talking about that could eventually lead to a point where you've achieved all this, but what's next? Is that an authentic question you're asking yourself?
Yeah. Absolutely, and it's one of the main things that we're doing in the first year. There's a lot of redefining, and one is redefining what is success. Mm-hmm. What is and success is basically being able to overcome any place you're stuck.
Well, let me ask you this then, Christina. For you, when you started this, let's just say, calling, what was the real experience for you that you knew it was your soul speaking to you about? What next, or where do we go from here? What was the difference between that and just that sort of conditioned yearning that I've been talking about?
Well, there were actually a lot of those moments because I think we need a lot of reinforcement along the path. But one that comes to mind when you ask that is in the very, very beginning of my practice, just my healing practice. I wasn't teaching really anything yet, hadn't written any books. So I'm living in Manhattan. I'm still dancing. I'm getting up early in the morning, doing yoga, walking to work, working 9 hours a day for $9 an hour. 9 hours a day for $9 an hour, going to rehearsal. I mean, it was a really long day, coming home at night and seeing one client. And that's how I began to build this practice. So it was a really challenging time in my life. But what I noticed is when I was in that role of the shaman, for lack of a better word, helping this person that was coming asking for that particular kind of healing, that I liked that person better. I liked her better. She was a better version of me, and I could see that. I could see it was me, but it was me more fully manifest, me without so much of those other programmings. In fact, without much of those other programmings at all, without all of that, kind of like the pollution of all these other ideas we've gotten about who we should be. And I grew up in a very small town in Oregon, so I had a lot of that programming, a ton. And I watched, it's like I was a third person watching myself doing this work with these people, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing in the beginning. I mean, I was just doing what I'd been taught to do, and allowing, you know, the spirit connection that I had made to move through me and help me understand what to do for this person. And I'm watching myself doing that and feeling what it feels like to be me and realizing this is a much better me. I want to be this person all the time. And that was really it. It is just that feeling, this is real. This is that possibility that I'm only touching every day. So that was part of it. I think with the teaching, the teaching is a different story. This Masks of Illusion and the Authentic Self, and coming into this teaching, at that point, you know, I have a little bit more of a foundation to stand on in my life because of the shamanic healing practice. But what's happening is these teachings that have come through in this authentic, non-traditional shamanic path, they just started to overrun me. So it was kind of like, bring us in the world or we're going to trample you. And so what I found in terms of my own balance, my own peace and harmony, is when I did my best, which was, you know, pretty crazy in the beginning, but did my best to bring these teachings out, my own personal experience of the day had more balance, more equilibrium in it. And the issues of the day didn't knock me off course so far. Just the normal issues of the day, you know, can I pay my rent, that stuff. And so there was a stabilizing force in doing that work, even though I couldn't have told you at the time what that work even was. I was still discovering that. But it stabilized things. And when I didn't do it, because I threw tantrums and didn't want to do it and said, go away, my life would destabilize. And that is an aspect, I think, of living our purpose for any of us, even if it's not this crazy shamanic thing. But any of us, when we are doing what we've come here to do, we come into balance. We stabilize. We start to, express health in our life. I mean, that is the cornerstone of our well-being, and we can feel it. And when we don't do it, things kind of fall apart.
I know that it's difficult, too, for people to, I guess, get out of what's called their comfort zone. And I've even, over the years, as we've been doing a series of programs on neurobiology, have been not only taught but have shared with the listeners the reason why you feel that sort of nervous breakdown about trying new things. That biologically it's not because you're incompetent or that, somebody may be a little bit better than you, but it's a biological fact that you will feel that everybody does. That there's a period of time that you will feel this because of how biologically the brain works. And when you think about something like, for instance, the work that you do with Masks of Illusion and the Authentic Self, I'm sure at first people probably feel uncomfortable, and it may be because, well, people are watching me, maybe, I don't know what kind of, if there are exercises that you do, for instance, when people decide they want to go into acting or performing, they go to a performance teacher to teach them to do these things. Well, if anybody has ever attended these kinds of classes, they'll know that there are some pretty ridiculous exercises these people make you do, that you worry about people watching you as you're doing them, so you're not so sure that you really want to do these things. And I encourage everybody, if you really want to break out of yourself, to find yourself, take acting classes.
So you can do all those weird things.
that'll really open you up, to really bring to surface your stuff and to cast that aside so that you can really be you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And I remember there's a really neat book out there for the listeners. We've actually had her on the program. Dee Wallace, actress from the movie E.T., talks about that very thing throughout her little memoir. And I thought, it just hit me one day. I thought, there's probably the greatest area of self-help. If people really want to, and it's not expensive, go take acting classes.
Mm-hmm.
That'll just work all that stuff out. Or perhaps like what we're talking about here with masks of illusion and the authentic self. Tell us, Christina, what can a person kind of expect, I guess, going to this? What happens?
Well, the first thing that you get to do is step out of your everyday life and all the demands and the email and the whatever and be in retreat. Be at a retreat center where you have made this gift to yourself to take this time to focus entirely on this relationship that we're talking about, which is your relationship with your authentic self. So that's the first thing. And, and that's a piece we get whenever we go on vacation, but we don't necessarily then ground that in action, learning new things, doing things that can help us bring more of our authentic self back. But that is the first piece, is to step away, step into that relationship and focus your week on that. You also meet a bunch of other crazy people that are just as uncomfortable as you are doing it, so that's helpful.
So everybody must leave their clothes at the door? Is that what happens?
Just their shoes. So what we do is something humans have done for a very long time, which is we learn to connect in a working relationship, not a worship relationship, but a working relationship with energies that are bigger than we are so that we can ask for help. And really a lot of this first week is about learning how to ask for help. And in particular, from energies that are bigger than we are, which is there's a lot out there. There's nature that's bigger than we are. There's, as I said, we all have spirit help, and that we can learn to communicate with it. It's coming to us in our dreams at night anyway, so we might as well actually acknowledge the relationship and be polite and use it. And so what we're doing then is we're learning to ask for help so that we can do three things in life. Learn to let go of the parts of ourselves that no longer serve us. And that is one of the places where people's creativity and energy is getting sort of absorbed, is in all these aspects of who we are. We're not really living anymore, but we're also not letting go. It's kind of like, well, let me just keep that in the garage because I might need it someday.
Ah.
Well, we do that with ourself, with facets of ourself. And so this is really about asking for help to learn to let go of those parts of ourself that may have simply been outmoded by our growth. This isn't about, oh, you're bad, I'm banishing you. This is thank you. Thank you for helping me get to this place in my life. You're tired, you're weary, you've done your job, and I'm going to let this energy go so that I'm going to have some space in my life and some energy to do something new, because that is another big problem with the self-help wheel, is it's always about something new.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all operating at over 100%, and every day. We're all exhausted at the end of the day. If we are going to do something new, really do something new, we need to find the resources somewhere. And from a shamanic perspective, that is always about being like nature, that recycling. The trees don't go, oh, these are the most gorgeous leaves I've ever had. I can't possibly drop them this fall. Right? They just drop them. Right? And so this is really about finding your leaves and dropping them, because you've been hanging on to them for like decades. You don't need them anymore. So, and this is about cultivating a conscious working relationship with death. Death as the ally. Death that basically allows you to say, if I knew I was going to die tomorrow, what would I do today? And that question starts to bring us into a more passionate life just by asking. Because most of us ask that question and go, not anything I have planned to do today. Not a damn thing. I wouldn't do anything I had planned to do today if I knew it was my last day on earth. And so this is about coming into that relationship. So the three things are, what do I need to let go of? What do I want to call in, which is that authentic self piece? And where in this process am I simply going to need to learn to have faith? Because faith is what we need, and it doesn't matter what you have faith in. The problem is when most people chuck their religious upbringing, which many people have done. We're the country that thinks we're spiritual but not religious.
Yes, of course.
The baby faith goes out with the bathwater.
Right.
And the thing is, for us to change, for us to even risk thinking a truly new thought, we have to have faith. We have to have faith to cross the gap. That's the only thing that gets across the gap, because we're not going to know. We can't know until we do it. You know, all these things we've learned reading our self-help books. But to do that, we need faith. And so this first week is really about working together through a very ordered, ongoing sort of rolling meditation process of learning, how do I notice the parts of myself that no longer serve me? How do I give them a good death? How do I call in what it is that I want to give birth to in my life, what I want to give life to? And where in this process am I going to need to have faith? And how, throughout this process, do I effectively ask for help? When do I need to show up and do the help? When do I need to call on my peers and colleagues, or my teacher because I'm confused, or my helping spirits, or simply the land that I live on? So that's what we do.
And how many divorces occur after this?
Well, two things happen. Mainly what happens is the spouse watches the spouse who's doing the workshops becoming more passionate, which usually in most of us means sexier, and watches the person becoming more loving and not quite so reactionary. And often the spouses, after they get over that, think, maybe I should do this too. So we actually tend to have people going through a couple years behind each other.
Oh, okay.
So they go through the training together, but often not simultaneously.
I see.
Every once in a while, there's some divorces, but it's usually something that should have happened years ago, and they just finally have the ability to do that. But, you know, anything in life could do that. Yeah, so it is the thing about the first year in this work and Master's Illusion and the Authentic Self is one really, really powerful skill is shared with people that is universal and not necessarily a shamanic skill, but it is a skill of clearing energy. So this programming you're talking about that we take on, we carry that in our body. And one of the main things we do in this week is we teach people how to track that energy to where it is held in the body and how it's held in the body and to release it. And this, if this is all anyone took from the week and they did it, it would change their life. Because, and I say that because it changed mine. I learned this skill at 26 from an amazing woman in the Bay Area, and it is utterly and completely life-changing because it just teaches you, for those people that always feel caught up in their family of origin patterns, teaches you to get out of that. Those people that always feel influenced by everybody around them, picking up everybody else's emotions, everybody else's issues, always getting distracted from their thing, teaches you to clear that. Teaches you when you keep reacting, overreacting to things, how to clear that. You keep underreacting to things. In other words, you let life shut you down. You bail. You got your thing going and then you bail. All that patterning. It's all just patterns, like you said. It's all just how we pattern energy, and you can learn to track the patterns. That's the beauty of a pattern, right?
Right.
You can track it, but you can track it backwards, and you can get to its source and release it there. And that's the reason we don't have as many divorces as we have spouses joining in, because that kind of person who can clear that stuff is really wonderful to live with.
I can't help it, Christina, but there was a time, and this was probably just a few months back, I was at a fast food place and just kind of enjoying a Coke, and there happened to be a woman, I want to say she was probably 20 years old. And you take a look at her, first of all, she was pregnant, and apparently the woman she was talking with was someone who was setting up the stages for adoption. So when she has this baby, the baby would be adopted to somebody who wants the baby. And while I was there, I was constantly hearing from this girl, well, I'm afraid of this, and this was probably going to happen, and all these potential outcomes of things that all just seemed negative, like the whole world was out to get her and she didn't stand a chance. And this story continually unfolded to, well, my mom wasn't there and my dad wasn't there, and I'm listening to this, and now there was a part of me that was rising up like, God dang it, why don't you get a clue and quit being afraid of everything? You just wanted to slap her upside the head, excuse me. But then what was even more remarkable is I started paying attention to these thoughts that I had and wondering, now where is this coming from? These ideals of judgment, and how if you just jumped in there and shook her up a little bit and said, hey, why don't you think about this? And what it was even more astounding is I was able to calm that down and just pay attention to my thoughts and then just kind of listen and be present, that was exactly what this other woman was doing. She was just sitting there listening. And, it's pretty astounding how we live in a world where we tend to hear problems in other people, and some of our first reactions are to jump in with advice about what to do. And I think maybe perhaps this is something that if we pulled back, we would learn that we would find out a lot about ourselves, because that particular moment presents itself in a way that we can begin to learn about those things about ourselves that we probably weren't paying attention to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's in this work. That is a really powerful teacher, and we actually learn to use it. And so there's this idea that your whole life is conspiring to bring you those moments of either interaction or, in this case, just observation that will bring those things up in ourselves. And the idea is that the life as the teacher is showing you precisely the issue you hold or pattern that is ready to be cleared.
Because you're reacting to it emotionally? Does that make sense?
Exactly. And so what you're noticing is yourself. And then you learn to track that emotion in the body back to see where it's really coming from and what needs to happen to bring some kind of reconciliation or release. Because it's almost always a part of ourself we're not fully living. And we need to find some way to unleash that and then bring that energy back into a kind of wholeness. We're so profoundly fragmented, and we don't really realize it. It's normal for an American to wander around that way. But the beauty of life is that it's so generous. It's constantly giving us those moments for us to respond to or to react to, that we can then track back and see, where did I leave myself behind? Where was I not able to really be there fully for myself? And once you learn to do that, you realize it's got nothing to do with the story that's happening out in front of us. But we bless the story for having brought it up in us so that we could follow our own process and clear it. And this goes back to the clearing skill that I was talking about. And one of the most important things in the work is learning to work with life as a teacher, because life's always there.
Oh, yeah.
It's always there trying to teach you. So how do you do that? I mean, we know that, but most people have no idea how to interface with it, because we do need some skills. We need to learn some skills to be able to really interface with that effectively. But that is one of the most powerful teachers, that noticing. That's really beautiful.
And as we speak about shamanism, the fact is, too, there was an interesting piece of advice I had learned years ago, that the natives had said, when you have a problem, simply sit in the forest and listen for the solution. And it's always there. But that's just it, is they were just saying, just be quiet, be still, and be patient. The solution is there. And it isn't so much that you have to wait for it to come to you. It's there. It's just a matter of time before you begin to see that it's been in front of you the whole time. And that's pretty fascinating, because you look at, for instance, YouTube, which is probably the largest search engine now that there is, and the most popular videos that are on YouTube that get the most views outside of these little random idiot things that sometimes happen is things that teach you how to do things. Where did we lose the confidence and the faith in ourselves to just simply try a thing like what we used to as kids?
And that's a big piece, actually, of coming back to your own authenticity, is really being able to bring a truly childlike quality back into how you go through the day, and to discern the difference between being childlike, that adventurous nature, that little sort of inner Tom Sawyer, versus being childish, which, frankly, most people, if they really look back at themselves through the day, could say, well, I was childish probably a dozen times.
Right.
And I'm a grown-up, and I really should behave better. And so this is a big piece, is your authentic self is not childish, but has a childlike quality because it's a great adventure. It's a great adventure to live our soul's purpose. And every time, we're here in this time, and this time is not the excuse to not do it. It's the perfect environment. It's the perfect set of stimuli for you to do whatever you've come here to do. That's why you're here now.
Now, what kinds of transformations have you seen in people? Maybe give an example or two of how someone was one particular way and then they found their own way, so to speak, through the masks of illusion and the authentic self, and now they're doing something completely different, perhaps.
Sure. One really powerful one, just, that's really a grounded example, is there is a lovely woman who's got grown children going through, and over her time, she had developed arthritis and various and sundry of that kind of chronic problem, and was really, frankly, in chronic pain all the time. And she was on a lot of different meds for that, and they'd medicated her for depression and all these different things. And it was 7, 8 different medications. And she wasn't really getting any better. She was just kind of going through the day. She was able to get off all of her meds.
Oh.
And there are certain things that she still has pain to manage, but now she's realizing she has a whole lot of other choices to make. Her head is clear. She's connected to herself. She's able to be her true self instead of just being sort of going through life in a fog from all those different pharmaceuticals. And some of the pain is actually resolved. I mean, some of it is, she's an older woman. Some of it is in her body, and it's going to take some time to work it out. But that's a big change for people. And there's a lot of people in that place where they took this med, and then because of that they had to take these. And to get off all those meds, especially those just horrible pharmaceuticals for depression, because if you're not depressed anymore, why are you still on the meds? And
right.
So it was a change in her physical health, her emotional health, and the ability to sustain that and to let all those medications go and to choose to deal with her life issues differently. And particularly to do it not depressed. So that happens in just terms of your quality of life. And then, let's see if I can think of an example. So there's another woman, really, really interesting transformation. She had a very successful, very, very financially and professionally successful life with, interestingly, a big pharmaceutical company. But she was also getting burned out. She was young, and she wasn't able to create all the other things she wanted in life. Love, stuff, all this other stuff. She was always working. And her work began to not really quite feel like her passion. She began to suspect that her success in this business came from all of those ways she'd learned to be, like you were talking about earlier, and that these weren't really authentic impulses. And so she did two things. She did the training, but she also took a sabbatical from work. And those two things, I have to be honest, they worked together. But now she creates handmade, gorgeous rattles and drums that are some of the most beautiful art tool things you have ever seen. And she's traveled around the world, learned all these ancient techniques to hand tan things and dye things, and she goes and walks in the woods and gathers sticks for rattles and plants for dyes and lichens and all this stuff. She's got this whole life she would have never imagined, and interestingly uses a lot of her chemistry to make the dyes, to do the tanning, all these different things. But it's an entirely different life, and she's really happy, and she's making beautiful tools that people can use in their life. And she's available to community, to friends, to meet partners. She's available to those other parts of her life that she just didn't have any time to be part of before.
Isn't it rewarding, especially, I'm sure, for you to see somebody who finally stands with their face in the sun?
And it's really exciting because people make these, like I said, we redefine successes. They make these steps that seemed absolutely impossible, months before, and they make these steps, and it's a constant community celebration. We talk a lot about the need to celebrate, and because I believe culturally we don't actually understand celebration. That
Well, evidence of that is the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, we don't recognize that when we have these small personal triumphs, they need to be toasted. We need to tell someone. Someone needs to come over and have dinner with us and bring a beautiful bottle of wine and toast this thing you've worked so hard to make happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because the warrior in us that gets all this work done gets really bummed out when no one ever sings their songs in the hall of the great warriors. You know, it's like it's so silent. It's so nobody ever talks about it. No one wants to admit they're doing it. And so the part of ourselves that does all that work, it just needs to hear it did a good job and to be toasted. And so there's lots of celebration for little things, for big things, and recognizing that there's not this big graduation at the end of the year like when we're in grade school, right?
Right.
But that there's all of these steps along the path. And every step, I mean, I always tell people who get frustrated, you can't hate step 4 because it's not step 18. You just got to take step 4 and then celebrate it. And I know you want to be at step 18, but you're not there yet, so celebrate this one and to really be in it and enjoy it.
I'd like to recommend for our listeners also, there's a wonderful little book out there, and this will be one of those you pick up and you read probably within an hour. You'll just be so ravenous through it. And he gives a really neat piece of advice that really fits in with what you're talking about in there. And that is to have a yearly calendar that if you do anything, you just put an X in the day, but if you want to go even further, you can put down what you did for that day, okay? And the thing is that you start seeing, for one, you're celebrating the little successes, as you're talking about. And the next thing is you begin to see that these become giant because of the ripple effects or the compounding effect. And people don't tend to see that very much. And what I did myself is I just went and I got a spiral notebook. So if there was something that I set forth, I've been somebody who's been notorious about never writing or planning my next day. Okay? So maybe there might be a moment that I'm running downtown on the bus or driving somewhere and I have a thought come to mind about something I want to do or get done. It stayed up there. It never got put on paper. You know how easy it is to get distracted enough to where that may never get done or it gets done further down the road. And there's a tremendous momentum when whatever that idea is, just get it down on paper, or that thing you want to do, just get it down on paper. That doesn't mean you have to get it done today. But at least it's down so you can get to it eventually, if at all. And so, anyway, in this book, it's called Steal Like an Artist. Okay? And the whole idea is that, as you're talking about here, Christine, is you put those little things down. Just writing it down, that's a win right there for you, okay? And if you get it done, that's another little win as well. You cross it off the list. But the other thing that I did with this list of things that I would do is when I would get them done, I'd cross them off. Or if I decided I just didn't need to do that anymore, I crossed it off anyway. The funny thing is by leaving that out there, in a place that I see it, maybe it's next to the chair where I'll watch a little TV where sometimes I think about what do I want to do the next day, is that I would start to see page after page after page of these things that I crossed off. And in looking at them, you know whether you've done those things or not. And you begin, or for me anyway, I would see that I had actually done all of those things. I didn't just cross it off just because I decided I didn't want to do it. I'd actually done it. And it gave me a real smile. And no matter how silly the thing was, it could have been make sure that I moved my shoes from this closet over from here to here. It was on the list, and if I did that, I crossed it off, or if I decided not to do it, I would cross it off as well, but almost all the time I did it. And that was a little win, and then you start seeing page after page of this, and you went, wow, I actually did something.
Yeah.
And you felt that sense of personal achievement like you're talking about.
Yeah, and we can take that a step further when we are, we have these colleagues along the path where we speak it. And then another beauty in that, which kind of accelerates that whole process, is we have a tendency to remember the beautiful things other people say. And so we get reminded
right.
that we spoke that, and how is that going, and how can I help you? And, and so that's a piece of it as well. And that whole way of being in the world just begins to build momentum. And that is one piece. You ask the change, and there are these personal changes, and there are larger collective or cultural changes. Because if one person changes, it starts to change everything. So if a whole group of people
sure it
change.
does.
And so one of the things that is changing is we all in this community that are going through these trainings are learning how, in our everyday contemporary life, how do I live more sustainably? Because that would be a manifestation of these teachings, is to live sustainably. And how do I live in a way that I honor and acknowledge the interconnection of things? How do I stop participating in that idea that I'm an individual and I get to make my own choices? I'm an individual and I'm responsible to make my own choices, but every choice I make affects everybody else and everything else, non-humans as well, plants, animals, you know. And so it also begins not just to change us individually, but change how we are a citizen. How do we participate in the world? And so there's sustainability, there's awareness of interconnection. There's also an awareness that there is something bigger out here than just humans. Humans make their worst quality decisions when they think they're the top of the heap. I mean, the worst quality decisions humanity has made over time has happened because those people believed they were it, and that this was it, and they were the best that was ever going to happen, and they had it right, whether it's the name of God or politics or whatever. They thought they were right, and they make terrible decisions. Human beings make better decisions when they are aware that they're a piece of something bigger. And that's part of what this is about, is training us, because we are deciders. We are always manifesting. There's no off button. We're big manifestation machines. So if we're going to manifest a whole lifetime of stuff, let's manifest stuff at the end of our life we can look back and be proud of.
Right.
And that we can really feel good about having our children and our grandchildren's grandchildren inherit. One of the things I talk about on my radio show is live a life that will be legend. That your grandchildren's grandchildren will talk about how you stopped the flow of alcoholism in the family. You stopped the giving it all away to the man and working your life in a dead-end job, and you bought a family farm and started organic farming, and that's why these great-grandkids are out here farming again.
Right.
You know, that to live a life that people will talk about, not just roll their eyes and go, oh, God, Grandpa.
Thank goodness he's not around anymore.
Right. And so that's the other piece, is it's not just the individual changes, but also how we as an individual now function in the world.
I always find that funny, Christine. I don't know about you, but you look back on photographs of these industrialists and even in European art for some reason, and they have such an imposing self-importance. You know, they don't smile, here I am, you know, Mr. Henry Ford or whoever it may be, for instance, and, you know, I'm the self-made man of America sort of a thing, or the European portraits where they're standing in front of a dark curtain, just standing there foreboding, you know, looking at the person looking on them. And I remember I came to that awareness as I was reading in a book of Zen, the difference between that and the art of Asia, Chinese art, in the way you're part of the environment, you know, that, you know, the tree is just as beautiful as the human that's enjoying it on the bridge that's over the stream in the valley, for instance. And then here's the European art. I thought, oh my goodness, no wonder they're so frustrated.
Absolutely.
How long does this usually take, or this course work, if you will, if somebody pursues the Masks of Illusion?
Well, the Mask of Illusion and the Authentic Self is just the name of the first week. And so each year has a week-long retreat experience where we're really getting away. And then 6 months later, there's a long weekend. And that, you know, often falls in the winter, and we use those holidays that show up in January and February. So we try to make that easy. It's still a retreat experience. However, the focus in that second piece of the year is really to look at, okay, how are you doing living what you created, the processes you got yourselves into in the week we were together? How are you doing with that? How do we problem solve that? How do we tighten up our understanding of the skills? And so there's very much this sense of getting people into a transformational process and then following through with that and checking back in with that. And so the years go that way, where there's a deep experience with lots of setting things in motion. You know, like I said, what do I need to let go of and what do I call in? That doesn't happen in that week. That gets started in that week. right? And then we learn skills to keep that process moving. It's one of the things that people don't really understand, and it's certainly fueled the transformation self-help market, and people have gotten rich doing this. But the bottom line is, because of that thing you were saying about the brain, you do not transform in a weekend. You do not, because any sense of yourself can hold itself together no matter the onslaught for 48 hours.
Right.
The issue is when we go past 72, when we go past that third day. And that's why the first part, the deep part that sets the transformation in motion is always longer than 3 days, because we need to get past that place where those structures that you actually want to break down start to wobble. Because then you can do what you need to do gracefully. It isn't just this, like Est used to be this incredible, onslaught, and there was almost a psychic violence to it. And this isn't that way. This is being together long enough that these structures that need to go begin to collapse under their own inefficiency. And so that's the setup, is basically to set these transformational processes in motion and understanding we're not going to transform in a weekend. We're not even going to transform in 2 weeks, that it takes time to undo and let go of the old things and bring in the new things. It's like real actions we have to take in our life. We can't just go away and do it in a weekend and come back and expect it to be fixed. We have to do things differently. I mean, if you want to change your life, you are going to have to change. There's no way around that, and our change is in our actions. It's our thoughts and aligning our actions with our thoughts and our words. And so this is a process, basically. And it's acknowledging that it is, instead of, frankly, manipulating people into thinking that it's not. We've got the perfect pill. Come and do this, and you'll be fixed in a weekend. No, you won't. It doesn't work that way.
It's so tough, too, because you see these, I guess, gurus would be a good way to call them, and you wonder to yourself, why are they so intense with a course of a weekend, as though they're forcing this change to happen, squeezing you through the round hole as a square peg, when it just biologically isn't possible. And getting back to neurobiology again, the reason that occurs is the brain is a highly efficient, and I'm just going to use a derogatory term for the brain, but machine, for basically taking care of literally seemingly millions of body functions simultaneously. That's a lot of work. Try to get a computer to do something like what the brain does, okay? So when you decide to do something different, whether you're walking to one store and decide, I'm going to go to this other store from now on, and it may be a little bit further, the brain says, well, wait a minute, we got used to doing this, and the reason is I wanted to get back to my efficiency because it takes a lot of energy for that change. So what happens is the brain starts going on high alert, saying we've got this new thing happening here. I'm not so sure if I really want to do this. That's where that self-talk comes in and says, don't you think it would be better? Let's just go to that shortcut over here and get back so we can get back to watching TV. It's a great trickster.
Right.
And the fact is, all it's saying is, look, okay, you're going to expend some energy here doing this new thing. Let me see if I can talk you out of it so I can just go back to normal things. So basically what you're saying is, no, let's work on a new fundamental, something different. And the brain will comply, as you said. You get past, you get up to the 72 hours. That sounds about right, that if you can do it for just 3 days, or whatever that is, and then take it to a week and then to a month, you'll find your brain will go, geez, hey, no problem. You've allowed me that time to adjust to this new thing. Now I'm back to my efficiency again. Yeah. The key is, though, and I'm sure that you help people to do this, is to get the brain into a regularity of changing constantly.
Exactly. and valuing it. And part of it is bringing out that adventure quality, that childlike nature where the mind goes, don't do that, it's closer to the store, we know it's there, we can find it really fast, and the adventure goes, yeah, but we might have an adventure if we go over.
Sure.
It's that sort of the healthy seduction into something new, because it could be fun, there could be a surprise. Maybe they have better chocolate,
Yeah. Well, and isn't it funny that as adults we get to a point that, we feel like there just is no mystery left, and the fact is there's more than you could ever imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll bet you experience that a lot with people, and you could probably even see that in their faces as they come to see you.
Well,
And that's why you make the masks.
Well, right, and a lot of people teach sort of shamanic work and try to make it all woo-woo and mysterious and exotic and dramatic, and frankly, those people can make a good living doing it. But my perspective is that this is really about how I live life in a way that's engaged, and if I do that, the magic will show itself.
Right.
The mystery will come to meet me, and that's really about how I orient in life, the kind of relationships that I make with myself and with life, and that I don't just let, and this is not dumping on the ego, but I don't let that efficient, ego-driven person run the whole show. It's not that I don't want it, because otherwise I wouldn't get up on time and do the things I need to do, but I want them, the adventurer, to be in conversation with them all the time, so the two of them. There's an idea in the center of shamanism called complementary dualism. It's not the dualism that is antagonistic dualism, which is usually what we mean as Westerners when we say dualism. That it's this antagonist thing, these two things can't coexist together. But complementary dualism is more like a yin-yang, an Eastern understanding of things, which is actually these two energies can't exist without each other. And so there is more this understanding that we want to set up those dynamics in our awareness, and we're aware of that as we go through the day. And that dynamic between the adventure and the ego is actually what creates the new things. And we start to live in life in a way that we're not just utterly change avoiding. To actually being sort of change inviting. And it doesn't mean we like change. We never like change. Humans are like that. But we like the result of it, so we're willing to do it because it will get us there. I mean, one piece of my history is I danced ballet as a child. Ballet hurts, period.
Oh, yes.
But you just learn that if you want this thing, this high ideal, which frankly none of us can even manifest, but if you want that, you're going to have to work hard, be disciplined, and some of it's going to hurt. But it allows you to learn as a child that you can manifest a vision. And this is one of the things that I find with contemporary people, and that whole childishness, is they want someone to bring the vision to them.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, because back to the soul's purpose, you're actually the only one who knows it. You just don't know you know it. And that's my job in this training, is to help you gain the skills to access the part of yourself that knows, and how to bring that voice to the table, who's making this, that internal decision-making group that's guiding you through your day. And how do you become a person who can invite change and can welcome it and wants your vision enough to be willing to go through the discomfort of changing. There's a beautiful Taoist understanding of comfort and discomfort. And because of this whole awareness, the idea is that which you've done, that which is comfortable, that which you're good at, is actually where you're dead. Because they're not changing there. You're just repeating what you've manifested. And yes, it's beautiful, especially the first time you did it, but now it's empty. And that place where we're alive is right at the interface between our comfort zone and our discomfort zone. And that we need to actually learn to live there, where we're just touching into that discomfort, and then we come out and we have a cup of tea, and it's like we're right there at that interface, because that's actually where we're alive. And especially when we're at a place in our life where the kids are grown, we've done a lot of that young 20-something dreaming. We're at a certain place in our profession where we either have a certain mastery in it or we want out and we want something new. But we're at that place in life. This understanding of comfort and discomfort is very important, and it's very powerful to learn. How do I judiciously sort of dive into this top part of my discomfort zone to be alive?
Right.
And learn the skills to do that, because the rest of that understanding is if you go too deeply into your discomfort, you actually start creating more. And so that's part of the problem with many of these systems that just sort of keep you in this work around your past, or you're constantly regurgitating the same stuff, is you're actually creating now. discomfort. That's unnecessary. And of course, the further, no pain, no gain attitude is now you're hurting yourself.
Right. Now, Christina, with the short amount of time, about 30 seconds, can you give people a place where they can find out more about your work?
Okay, you can go to lastmaskcenter.org, which is my website. And if you go to the calendar, you will see that Masks of Illusion is in August. And so you can get the dates, logistics, contact person's name there. You can even register. If you're so excited today, you can even register at that point. And the class is already half full. And they're not big classes so that I can really be there with everybody. So if you are inspired, get on it.
Absolutely. Well, Christina, thank you so much for being here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel.
You bet. We want to also encourage you listeners to visit us at our website where we'll have a hot link there for you that you can find out more about the Masks of Illusion and your authentic self. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you again for joining us. Be sure to visit us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50, and you'll find out more about it. Thank you again for joining us, and remember, live your day past halfway.